Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. Time for yet another show. It's Tuesday. We've moved on. Federal mandate insists that we move on from Monday into Tuesday. And I'm sorry, but we're knuckling under. We're going to comply with this one. And we, in fact, complied in advance. Right at about midnight or so, we decided we'd go along with declaring today Tuesday. Much to catch up on as usual. You could spend all day on the things we were spending all day on already. Or you could try to spend all day on things we used to spend all day on, like the Jeffrey Epstein story, which still isn't over. No additional information released, no files coming out that give us any real insight into anything. But lots of people still clamoring for it. But a lot of the people who from the right who are driving this by acting in open rebellion against Trump in terms of their position on the release of the files have instead found the distraction, yes, of Charlie Kirk, and it's been welcome respite for them. The right is united, and every time we have a unite the right situation, well, things tend to go a little bit crazy. So, all right. Lots to catch up on, as I said, and including a number of stories that I think many of you have likely heard, although some of you tend to shut out the traditional news inputs that you've got and maybe catch up on the news with us. So I don't know. But we can't get it all. First off, this morning, I guess the breaking news of the morning is the death of actor, director, activist, as they list him in all of the obituaries as well. And it's true, certainly the case. Robert Redford, 89 years old. You know, total legend, and don't know what to say about it except that's one that will be missed by a lot of people from a lot of generations, and with good reason. And a guy who was in or directed or whatever, produced, wrote, in some cases, I guess, some of the iconic films of like 3 or 4 different eras of film, I would say, probably more than that. So that very much on everyone's minds. That will affect you. This is one of those cultural losses that people across several generations will feel and feel deeply, and they'll be talking about it all day long. Celebrity deaths to me usually are, they're either I've heard of that person or I've not heard of that person. I don't know I don't know if there's been one where I really felt deeply like, oh my gosh, my day is going to be impacted by this, but I don't know. Well, anyway, at least this is somebody with whom I'm thoroughly familiar and not catching up on after the fact. So lots of people will be talking about that, and lots of people will be talking about his legacy, and a lot of it is political as well. So there'll be much discussion of it. Maybe that might be something Greg wants to touch on tomorrow as well. I would not be surprised in the least. All right. So if you haven't heard that news, you might want to check in with your favorite news outlet for their obituary type treatments of the situation. Lots of excellent Robert Redford film clips circulating, and take your pick, I suppose. And what a time for an exit. That's not a bad idea, honestly. If you're coming to that point, this is a rough period to be holding on for at this point. What do I mean? Come on. What, are you kidding me? You know what I mean. Where to start with today? Well, we'll begin by adding that Donald Trump has ordered the United States military, and they have complied, to blow up another Venezuelan boat. I mean, it doesn't even rise to the level of ship at this point. Again, on the claim that, it was totally carrying drugs, and everybody on it was a terrible, terrible member of a very violent gang that are terrorists. And, we still have no proof of the first one. And at this point, he delivered a line, I guess, yesterday. It was being shared yesterday when the news broke, but I'm not certain it was yesterday's line or if he was just repeating a previous day's line. And he tends to do that. Yes. All right. Him more so than others, I guess, but all presidents, all political actors, repetition is, a staple. Because, of course, as Greg tells you, that's the way adults learn. Now, Trump is looking for adults not to learn, of course, but still, he seems stuck in a loop more than anything else. But he yesterday was reusing, I think, the line about how he's actually pleased somehow that maritime traffic in and around Venezuelan waters, he claims, is coming more or less to a standstill. If true, then it's all sorts of problems ensue from that. I mean, the attack itself, under most people's interpretation of international law, just outright illegal. I mean, I guess I would say piracy comes into it, except that there was no attempt made to steal the goods. It was simply a high seas murder. And this one, too, and same methodology, I think. And we'll have to wait for the details to come out over the next couple of days to find out whether they did the same thing. The ship turned around or anything, of boat turned around or anything of that nature. But he seems pleased with himself, as he always does, no matter what he has done. But he's musing aloud about, gee, I wonder why it is that there's hardly any shipping going on in Venezuela. Maybe it's because, maybe you're a fishing boat and you're up and you think maybe I shouldn't go out there. Maybe they'll think I have drugs downstairs, as he says, on the boat, and I'll be attacked. So maybe I shouldn't go out. So that's fantastic. Maybe I shouldn't be doing subsistence fishing or something just to feed myself, or running my fishery business, or moving goods and services either within Venezuelan territory or with nearby trading partners, United States or otherwise. Everything now gets paralyzed because the United States might murder you from the sky. That seems like a bad, bit of international relations. And anyway, he's taking great joy in musing about this. And gee, I wonder why there's nobody out on their boats. So, this is the sort of thing that normally internationally people would not put up with, let's say. But us being the regional hegemonic power, it's very difficult. Venezuela is not in a position to do anything but protest to international organizations about this. And, of course, Trump will immediately cast doubt on their claims by invoking the word drugs and say that's happening. Now, I don't know. And by the way, this is also the claim, part of the claim of authority as well. Those drugs are supposedly coming to the United States. By the way, I don't know that, a small open craft like that is the way you would be run. I don't know how you're running drugs to the United States. I suppose they could be island hopping their way up. And I suppose you could feasibly, if the weather's okay, cross the Caribbean Sea in a craft like that and be perfectly safe. It wouldn't be my choice, but, and if you're smuggling drugs, you clearly don't want to do it in a super tanker or something like that. But I was wondering if the theory is what these drugs are coming in and they're harming our American citizens and children and whoever else, puppies, anybody else who might be vulnerable and make you cry if they were hurt. But I'm wondering whether could you on Maha grounds sink a container ship full of pharmaceuticals being imported from Europe? Something like that. Robert F. Kennedy thinks they're harming Americans, killing children. But I can't imagine torpedoing one of those and saying, well, they're coming to America to kill us because something, and I guess those guys have suits and ties. It's a very bizarre situation we find ourselves in. It occurs to me now I'm going to have to give myself a note about looking for the clip, and I'm sure it's Aaron Rupar has got it, for a clip of Trump giving his spiel about sinking the boat, and I wonder why nobody is out on the water anymore. But I'm pretty sure that Aaron Rupar is pretty much providing all my video input at this point. I should probably be broadening my sources, but he does a pretty damn good job about it. All right. I guess I'll also mention something else that was much discussed, and I probably also will have to go and find the clip for it. This is just things that I see in passing, but in case you're like actively staying away from this kind of news, Greg Gutfeld, is that the way he says his name? The Fox News personality who sits in on their stupid show, The Five, their, I guess, debate panel discussing the great issues of the day, which is no dumber than what we do here. Except, of course, it includes Greg Gutfeld, who is, in fact, dumber than what we do here. And so he put on quite a show. A lot of deep-seated vitriol coming through yesterday, in which, by the way, they finally did the line. Republicans finally delivered the line in the questioning over they're saying, how dare you do anything but fall to your knees and rend your garments over the death of Charlie Kirk, and in fact blame it on, quote unquote, the left, the mysterious them. And I got a piece for you about that, by the way. But if you're not doing that, you're doing them a disservice, and you deserve some sort of punishment yourself. And the legitimate question from one of the people they put on as tokens to offer up outrage bait, I guess, as ostensible liberals on the. I don't keep track on who's on the Five. I don't know them the same way I hear the names of the people on The View far more often. But anyway, but putting up the objection, hey, well, what about with the killings of Democratic legislators and families and attacks on other legislators in Minnesota, Melissa Hortman in particular, obviously the former Speaker of the Minnesota State House. And by the way, I guess good segue here. Today's Tuesday. Tomorrow being Wednesday, you'll hear from Greg Dworkin about what happened today, because Tuesday elections. Where? Special elections. Where? Minnesota, to choose a successor to Melissa Hortman's seat, because she was, of course, murdered by, one of those people that never commits violence, right-wing extremists. But somebody asked, well, what about this one? How come, no lowering of flag there? Trump was asked about that the other day, too, just yesterday. And he said, nobody asked me to. If the governor had called me and asked me, I certainly would have. I'm not opposed to that. But of course, you may recall at the time that Trump refused to call the governor in that period and said it would be a waste of time to talk to him. So I don't know how effective the request really would have been at that point, or whether it would have even made it through. But that's another story for, every other day. But when faced with the objection, hey, what about, you say only, this is another one of these claims Gutman was making, that, this violence only goes in one direction. Right-wing people don't perpetrate this kind of violence. Only left-wing people do. And it's crazy, and we have to put a stop to it. And only one side has this problem. She says, what about Melissa Hortman? And he really goes to town and delivers one of the most vitriolic, I guess, what's supposed to be a rebuttal. But he really seriously loses his cool. And he ultimately says, don't give me that crap. Or as that's Greg bullshit. Says it. Yeah. He goes right ahead and says it right on the air. And I guess that's okay on Fox and Friends. I don't know. But he says that's a BS excuse, and it's not a real thing. And I mean, he acknowledges that it happens, but he says the difference is nobody ever heard of Melissa Hortman before. We didn't spend every day discussing what she's been talking about on her podcast, or she wasn't a leading national voice. No one ever heard of her before she was killed. And so therefore something, and the woman says, and so that doesn't count. Don't give me that bull. How dare you? You don't know. I know exactly what you're doing, trying to bait me with this one, that one, both sides. It's not like that. Republicans, conservatives don't resort to violence. I mean, and then he goes on to say, we're not the side with the cognitive dissonance, which is amazing. But yeah, but he does eventually deliver the line that Republicans have been dying to deliver for days now. What about Melissa Hortman versus all of your stupid claims to the contrary of all the evidence? And he just says, I don't want to hear about it anymore. We don't care. We don't care about your both sides stories. We don't care about this. We don't want to hear it. And yeah, so that's it. She doesn't count. She's not one of them. They don't care. You can kill all the Democrats you want. We don't care. It finally got a chance to deliver it. So there you have it. I thought that was rather interesting. If you want, you can search around. I think we can find you that clip, and I can provide it to Scott, and we'll pass it on in today's summary of the show. I just thought it was, rather remarkable, and you may have missed it, but if you were waiting to hear which one would be the first one out to say, yeah, the Hortman thing is she's just a nobody. Charlie Kirk, why he belongs on Mount Rushmore. I said that I had something for you, and this is as good a segue as any, about the blame game that Republicans are playing. And I mean, I think you've figured it out by now. You've seen an example of it somewhere, but some coherent thoughts already laid out for us over at HuffPost by Paul Blumenthal, who writes about the dangerous word Republicans keep using after Charlie Kirk's murder. And, you could have any number of guesses at what that word is. Is that revenge, retribution? Well, that's what it's about, but it's not the word he has in mind. Conservatives' efforts to blame some, quote, ready? That means the word is coming. Some, quote, they for attacks. Crafts a narrative of victimhood aimed at enacting retribution against their political opponents. The piece is illustrated with video of yesterday's guest hosting of the Charlie Kirk show. Apparently, that's his wife's stream of income. So the show's continuing, and I don't know whether they have somebody for every day or whether he's doing the whole week or whatever, but because there's nothing else going on in his life and he's got nothing else to do, J.D. Vance, ostensibly the vice president of the United States, is, or was at least yesterday, guest hosting the show. And of course, that doesn't mean that it was dry toast. It was, revenge themed. And he, of course, hosted Stephen Miller, which made it even worse. And so it's been a real cesspool in the last couple of days. And of course, Miller's great specialty on behalf of the administration, when he speaks on behalf of the administration, is that he is unafraid of any boundaries normally drawn by propriety. And he will go way, way, way out on the limb, further than almost anybody. And I guess in terms of the way framers, frame shop type communicators go, moves very drastically and dramatically and purposefully aims to move the Overton window and make ever more ridiculous claims mainstream. So Miller, of course, goes way out there. And, well, you ought to hear it, but I don't know if you're going to hear it here. But let me read you what Paul Blumenthal has collected here. In the immediate aftermath of conservative activist Charlie Kirk's murder on September 10th, Republican politicians and influencers jumped to lay blame on the political left with a blanket insinuation they did it. They assassinated our nice guy who actually talked to them peacefully, debating ideas. Now, that's a very, I would say, I don't know, 6th grade sentence, possibly. So who might that be? That's Murdery Trader Green speaking on Twitter, X, as they now call it, alongside a call for a, quote, peaceful national divorce, civil war. It will be peaceful if you guys surrender in it, but otherwise, we'll fight in it and murder you. They couldn't silence him, so they killed him. Lots of theys, says Elise Stefanik. And they're killing us in our churches. They tried to kill our president. They killed Charlie, one of our greatest advocates, conservative podcaster Matt Walsh said on X. If they won't leave us in peace, then our choice is fight or die. Little-known billionaire Elon Musk wrote on X, and hardly anybody was listening to that, of course. They are at war with us, Fox News anchor Jesse Waters said on September 10th. The evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination, the level-headed and, normally reserved and now withdrawn, obviously, in the wake of her husband's death. Yeah. The evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination have no idea what they have done, Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, said. I guess now we have to learn her name. They should know this. They should all know this. If you thought that my husband's mission was powerful before, you have no idea what you have just unleashed across the country and this world. Sort of the Obi-Wan Kenobi message. Strike them down, only become more powerful. Maybe. They almost killed Donald Trump. They killed Charlie Kirk, both outdoors. That seems like a kind of a dumb thing to add to that, but who's dumb enough to make a point of that? You're only given a couple of words to splash across the national scene. Both outdoors. Thank you, Nancy Mace. Yes, that was a genius statement. Both with bullets. They almost did this. Anyway, who they is rarely said explicitly, though it is heavily implied. Some blurry coalition or Venn diagram encompassing Democrats, liberals, and political opponents, but also institutions that are already right-wing targets, such as think tanks, donors, and higher education, with some conservatives blaming one semester of college suspect Tyler Robinson attended for radicalizing him. We heard about that one yesterday. Conservatives' efforts to blame some vague they for those attacks are not a slip of the tongue. It crafts a narrative of victimhood aimed at enacting retributive repression or violence against their political opponents. This is made explicit in calls to indict billionaire liberal donor George Soros, who I'm sure totally was, he was busy writing things on bullets, of course. Investigate and dismantle liberal nonprofits. Yeah, Meals on Wheels killed Charlie Kirk. And target media companies, none of which appear to have had any involvement as a response to Kirk's murder. By the way, among the targeting of media companies, Trump, I guess, people who purport to be lawyers for Trump have filed what was purported to be a lawsuit for $15 billion against the New York Times and a couple of their writers there, too, by the way. And apparently, the people who have seen the pleadings that were filed have said the most just utterly outlandishly stupid, not real things, and expressed again in, basically in Murdery Trader Green type terms, simplistic, idiotic child's idea of what it means to sue somebody for anything. And it's a little weird. We'll talk about that perhaps after this. But anyway, yeah, so everybody did it. George Soros, loose cabals, tight cabals, newspapers, etc. And then, of course, Vice President J.D. Vance made this clear that they believe that this is the case in a furious speech stating that the country cannot be united unless the institutions of the political opposition are dismantled and destroyed. Normal democratic, liberal democracy stuff. While hosting Kirk's podcast on Monday, an unusual thing in itself, and by the way, I guess you have to add that to his having flown Kirk's body home, wherever that may be, not to his house as a collection or a collector's item, but rather to his own home presumably for burial, I guess, unless they're building a Lenin-type tomb for him, also a possibility. But flew him there on Air Force Two, which kind of unheard of for somebody who's not a government officer of some kind. But, they're trying anything they can to lionize him. Anyway, while hosting Kirk's podcast on Monday, Vance stated that the far left is statistically more likely to support political violence, appearing to cite a YouGov poll. Now, actually, it says parenthetically here, data shows right-wing political violence is far more prevalent than left-wing violence. But it's interesting. I mean, the truth is what it is, and the data shows what it shows, and it's the opposite of what J.D. Vance says, and everybody's got a duty to point out that the data is the opposite of what he's saying it is. But this is one of those, instances in which they're making a purely raw emotional appeal, and to, parse it with statistics. While it's necessary to lay out that the facts are there for the kind of people who are analytical who will look to this, and some of them will, yeah, it still ends up looking like, raw emotion and manipulation on the one side, cold fish kind of response, the data thing on the other side. But somebody has to lay it out there. I know. All right. Well, anyway, he then pivoted to criticize online posts that celebrated Kirk's death and articles that noted what Kirk actually said in life. The bad stuff. He specifically took aim at an article in the left-wing magazine The Nation that castigated Kirk's political rhetoric. Did you know the George Soros Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation, the groups that funded the disgusting article justifying Charlie's death? It doesn't. Do you know they benefit from generous tax treatment? Oh, boy. We're going to get the Istook Amendment revived. They are literally subsidized by you and me, the American taxpayer, Vance said, implying that the administration would target the tax-exempt status of liberal nonprofits. And how do they reward us? By setting fire to the house built by the American family over 250 years. Some of the family were slaves, but, whatever. He went on to say that the country can only have, quote, unity after, quote, we work to dismantle the institutions that promote violence and terrorism in our own country, meaning them, not me. They're already under investigation. They're already under major investigation. President Donald Trump told reporters on Sunday, the major being the tip that, nothing is happening yet, but it will. I don't doubt that they're going to try and do this. But that was Trump telling reporters what liberal organizations would face following Kirk's death. Nowhere did Trump say who they are. Robinson's motives and political beliefs are for the moment unknown. Still the case. What appears clear is that he acted alone, and when he confessed to his family, they forced him to turn himself in. All right. Well, that news hasn't changed. No further developments on that front. We'll be right back after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Scott has already found me at least one citation of the story about Greg Gutfeld. Is it Gutfeld? So that's good. I mean, it's bad that he did it, but it's good that he's found it. So now I don't have to read you that article, of course. We've already gotten the gist of what's going on there, but just by way of proof, I suppose, that this thing has actually happened, if you haven't seen it circulating on social media, though you may already have seen that. So we were in the middle of reading Paul Blumenthal's compilation of the numerous right-wing figures, and there's many more to go. I don't know if they all make appearances in here, but the most egregious, I suppose, or most illustrative of the point. Anyway, blaming it on all of it on a nebulous they, and you can plug in anything you want in they, whether it's liberals in general, whatever that might mean, Democrats, socialists, George Soros, drug dealers and terrorists, Antifa, or whatever else you might want to pin the whole thing on. Anyway, so yes, they're already under investigation, major investigation, says Donald Trump about that one. this blanket insinuation that a nebulous they killed or attempted to kill conservative political figures has become a tick on the right after tragic events. Just as Mace did this week, back in 2024, conservatives blamed the 2 assassination attempts on President Donald Trump on an amorphous they to insinuate that all of the Democratic Party, liberals, and the left were to blame. And by the way, you will know this already, but I think it maybe illustrates a good point. Now that we're in the middle of struggling with what did this kid who, and again, I don't mean to let him off the hook in any way for saying he's a kid, but he is a kid. He's a kid who's guilty of murder and obviously is old enough to be tried and as an adult by far, given that Trump would try people 14 and over, at least in the District of Columbia as adults. And being 22, this shooter, not a kid, certainly not for legal purposes, but, what can you do? It comes out that way from time to time. And it's a dismissive sort of thing, too, in this sense. Anyway, I was going to say, while we're puzzling still, because it's fresh in our minds, and it's confounding in many ways, puzzling over what is this all about? Was there any ideology at all? And by the way, I should play you the second half of that fantastic video that we played the first half of yesterday, just to give those who are strangers to, if not Groyper culture, then black pill culture. We should hear more about that because it is a pattern that seems to be replicating itself. Something to keep an eye on because it's worrisome. But while we're in the middle of puzzling over this, consider that, of course, Republicans keep reminding us, well, this violence only goes one way, which is a total lie. But then they point to the one thing that everybody can remember. Well, there was the time the guy shot at me, your favorite president, shot Donald Trump in the ear, I guess, maybe. And he's had fantastic reconstructive surgery that makes it look like he was never shot in the ear. You know how that goes. Anyway, what can I tell you? I was going to say, we puzzled briefly in the same way over that kid, and we never really did nail that down. And eventually, the question just stopped being asked. But there was certainly an effort to say, well, the left, and then enough information. No more information there than there has been so far here, but the information begins to come out that illustrates to everybody who's trying to analyze this thing. At the very least, this is not somebody that would neatly be pigeonholed as some sort of wild-eyed leftist or mild-mannered leftist, for that matter. Not leftist at all. And that was the first hint that there's maybe sometimes crazy people who do stuff like this are not motivated by what we consider normal political ideology or anything like it. They're motivated by something completely different. I don't know that you would be able to establish that the one who took a shot at Trump and, well, now that he's dead, and this one who killed Charlie Kirk are coming from the same circles, even among, online nihilists. They have their own circles. And some of them, I guess, more ideological than others, and some not ideological at all. But I just want to sort of point out that after puzzling over it for a little while, and then realizing, well, his target isn't dead, and he is, conservatives gave America the permission to give up the search, to stop pondering it. But I mean, you'd think that maybe like serious investigators would have been probing this the whole time, and one, that they would have discovered something, but apparently they haven't. Or if they they haven't disseminated it widely, and people aren't interested enough in it to circulate it further. But basically, we've already had what would have been like the ultimate political assassination, whether it was political in motive or not, shooting a presidential candidate from a major party who was a former president and looked to be, well, it turned out to be, was in position to win re-election. And to have that person killed on the campaign trail would have been just the biggest, splashiest thing ever. the most tremendous news since Kennedy, I guess, which is ridiculous to think of Trump in those terms, but it happened. And though it didn't result in any serious injury, as it turns out, we just dropped it after like a week. We can't figure out what this motive is, and nobody has ever really looked back. No one has even. A few people have said, "How come we stopped looking?" About that. I just wonder about that. Now, with the Charlie Kirk shooting resulting in a death, this will linger longer. But this could absolutely end up the same way. And I mean, for Donald Trump, it already has. He's moved on to the ballroom and other sorts of policing, other things. So we got the retribution goes on just fine. The wondering about the motivation of why somebody would shoot Charlie Kirk has kind of come to a dead stop. They're so disinterested in finding out what it is. In part because probably because it would expose, what the motivation actually was, which is not particularly good for the right. And two, it would be an opportunity wasted to blame it on the left and start pogroms against people they disagree with, and that would therefore cheer them up quite a bit. It's just interesting that we've been through this and found that, you can kind of run into a brick wall and walk away from it. But it's a wasted opportunity to do so. So here we go. Anyway, where were we here? They want to do everything they can to silence Donald Trump, and they send that signal with every action that they take, Vance said back in 2024 over that incident. Well, if you're trying to silence Donald Trump and you're sending the message that we have to do everything that we can to silence Donald Trump, a crazy person is eventually going to take that message to heart. That's a worry. Certainly. For instance, I don't know, let's say, what if a Fox News host like someone of the caliber, if you will, of, no pun intended, of Brian Kilmeade were to say on the air, why don't we just kill the homeless? They're such a problem. Let's just kill them all and be done with it. And then like a couple days later, like let's say today, you woke up to the news that in a city already racked with violence and controversy, like let's say Minneapolis, Minnesota, you woke up to the news that someone had walked into a homeless encampment and started gunning people down at random. Let's say that were the case. What would you think about that? And, of course, the answer would be, I would think you were reading me the news because that actually happened. Just pausing and taking up that tangent, I happened to notice a Blue Sky post just this morning from one Ashley Fairbanks, about whom I know very little, but apparently a very popular figure on Blue Sky, who notes for us quite correctly that first a Fox News host, that's Kilmeade, suggests we euthanize the homeless, and there's been like 10 rounds of discussion of this, and because it's come up 10 times and we haven't discussed it yet on the air, I'll point that out. Many people pointing at that characterization, a very common characterization, euthanize the homeless, to point out there was no indication. I mean, it seems like a small point given what was at stake, but there was no indication on Kilmeade's part that he was talking at all about, like any sort of humane euthanization. It was outright murder. Let's give them lethal injections. And he did say involuntary lethal injections. I don't know how many lethal injections are voluntary these days. Are all the kids doing it? I don't know. I wouldn't know. I'm an out-of-touch old man. But my guess is most lethal injections involuntary. Maybe it was superfluous to include that. But, and I think maybe that was it. Like, there's also lethal injection, which really is euthanization usually for animals. So maybe that's where the confusion came in. But people making the very correct point. He didn't say euthanize. He just said, just kill them. It was harsher than that. But aside from that, she makes the excellent point when saying a Fox News host suggests we euthanize the homeless. And then someone goes into 2 homeless encampments, by the way, and starts shooting. 13 people are shot. And her criticism here is that Jacob Fry, who I guess is the mayor of Minneapolis, and the media are just talking about how it's actually the best reason to clear the encampment. So that's a danger, a public health danger, for a number of reasons, not the least of which, I mean, I guess their preferred reason is open drug use and garbage and unhealthful situations in general. But also if it's drawing people who are perpetrating mass shootings there, it's not something you want in your neighborhood. But at the moment, perhaps the more important response would be, hey, people have been murdered here and we can't have that. But there's an accompanying article with it. We won't read at the moment, but just so that you know it's there, and I'll include it in the round, or I will ask Scott to include it in the roundup from KSTP. We're shutting this thing down is a quote that begins the headline. 8 shot at Minneapolis homeless encampment hosted by landlord, just so you know about the legal status of it. Fry, the mayor, pledges action. Josh, I gotta try and pronounce his last name. Josh's last name, the reporter, is Skluzachik, maybe? That's a stab in the dark. 8 people injured late Monday night in a shooting at a Minneapolis homeless encampment that has been at the center of a dispute for months. Somehow the number has gotten up to 13, as Ashley pointed out, and maybe because it involved 2 different encampments, or the number may have gone up. People discovered with injuries overnight. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry. Oh, by the way, the shooting came less than 12 hours after another shooting just 2 miles away that left 5 others injured. There's your answer. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry, it's Frey, not certain about his pronunciation, said officers are still looking into the possibility that the 2 shootings could be connected, but added that he wouldn't be surprised. And by the way, they should be looking at all sorts of connections. Was it the same person? Maybe. Were they motivated by the same impetus, the same instigation? Brian Kilmeade's suggestion that they ought to be killed. Were they motivated by it all? I don't know. It's a little difficult to prove, and motive is always a tricky thing, particularly when you're arresting people who are interested in confounding, at the very least, confounding you in their prosecution. It's rare that they'll give a, thoroughly helpful and truthful confession, but sometimes they do. But it's a logical conclusion to draw that it would be worth investigating. Were they motivated by seeing on a major television network that, the homeless ought to be killed, and it might be a good thing? Maybe. Anyway, let's jump back now. We're going to do the weave and go back to Paul Blumenthal's take here in Huffington Post, although now I have to go and find the spot where we left off. But his story about compiling the efforts by conservatives and Republicans to blame a very nebulous they for all of this. Oh, yes, right. So we had just read about Vance's response to the shooting, the assassination attempt on Trump on the campaign trail in 2024, and saying, if you're trying to silence Donald Trump and you're sending the message that we have to do everything we can to silence Donald Trump, a crazy person is eventually going to take that message to heart. And look, it's happened. I can't believe it. But you know what? They won't acknowledge that one because that doesn't count because it's BS, Greg Gutfeld will tell everybody. They tried to smear us. They came after us. They impeached him twice. And then, guys, they tried to kill him. And it's because of the Democratic Party. They can't do anything right. Eric Trump, the president's son, said at a 2024 rally at the site of the first assassination attempt against his father. That's where the family wants to go back to rally. Thomas Michael Crooks, the perpetrator of the first assassination attempt against Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, was a registered Republican who was found to have no ideological motive for his actions. Well, drop that hot potato. A social media account believed to belong to Crooks posted comments that appear to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes, espouse political violence. Then FBI Director Paul Abate told Congress in 2024. So that's why they just decided to drop that one entirely. But there is precedent for them finding out that, oops, it isn't the story we wanted, and just dropping it. The second would-be assassin Ryan Wesley Routh, we don't know how to pronounce that guy's name, stated a strong dislike of Trump, but was a registered independent who voiced support for various Democratic and Republican candidates. Perhaps more notable is his long criminal record of 8 arrests and more than 100 criminal charges filed against him. He's also attempted to volunteer to fight for Ukraine against the Russian invasion, but was seen by volunteer fighters as delusional and disconnected from reality, as opposed to the ones who try to join the Russian side, who they hope are delusional. And you kind of have to be to join their side. Their political beliefs aside, these were all lone wolf actors. It's an iffy description of people who are actually, involved in the black pill world, perhaps. But they're lone wolves in real life, but are they alone in their online lives? No. There was no network or political party apparatus supporting them, not in a traditional sense anyway, I would say. These shooters, or would-be shooters, did not have connections to politics except that they read or watched the news like almost every other, like most other Americans. Instead of grappling with underlying problems for radicalizing violence, like the easy access to firearms, nihilistic online death cults, maybe you should look into, or mental health issues, the right seek to cast all tragedies that befall them as perpetrated by their political opponents or on account of having too many doors. They do that too. Blaming a stated they enables the right to use this tragedy as a means to achieve what they were already working toward, crushing their political opposition and forcing, quote, unity on the country on their terms alone. There is no they lurking in the shadows here, just the phantoms that animate the right's dream of retribution. Remember, that was their actual re-election platform. I am your retribution. So how's that going, by the way? Has your retribution lowered your grocery prices? Grocery is a word I just actually most people don't know about, but I came up with it. I invented it myself. Well, the answer to that, by the way, is no, in case you were looking for the economic news. Do I have a specific discussion about that? I probably do have one somewhere, but that's not where I'm going next. Small bore but very important background story, and it happens to fall just chronologically next in my Instapaper compilation. Just thought maybe I'll just give you the headline and a few paragraphs on this one, although once you start reading things, it always gets intriguing. But Mediaite, and in particular Michael Luciano at Mediaite, reports under this headline, Pam Bondi, boo, do I have a boo? No. Well, I have this.
Liar!
Yeah, right. Okay, well, anyway. Pam Bondi. Oh, I do have this one. Where's my other sound effects that I use for some of Greg's stuff, right? Pam Bondi. No, it's serious. Pam Bondi threatens charges over Office Depot employee. Now, over Office Depot employee. The charges are against who? The Office Depot employee or Office Depot in general? Both, probably. Threatens charges over Office Depot employee who refused to print Charlie Kirk flyers. Then a quote, "We can prosecute you." That's the headline on this Mediaite piece. How much do you want to know about this one? Attorney General of the goddamn United States of America, if you can believe it or not. Or I should say, I'm not Jeremiah Wright. It's not the goddamn United States of America. It's the goddamn Attorney General we're worried about here. The goddamn Attorney General of the United States of America, unbelievable, Pam Bondi, said that the Department of Justice is considering bringing charges against the now fired Office Depot employee, fired, so what's the charge, who refused to print flyers advertising a vigil for Charlie Kirk. We're looking at that, she said on Fox News on Monday night. That was her job, and going there pretending that they were going to be exacting retribution here. I don't know. I guess we'll read on and find out where the thing is. But by the way, how has the DOJ been faring in quote unquote bringing charges against some of these people they want to take retribution on? Not great. Grand juries in D.C., by the way, continue. I think they're now up to like 7 no bills on people they've been trying to charge for activities as nefarious as being nearby when a Homeland Security person skins their knee. So, stuff like that. That's an assault. I was looking at whether or not I wanted to arrest that guy because he's very brown and I tripped and skinned my knee. Your fault. You're under arrest. It wasn't quite like that, but you get the idea. We know what happened, of course, to Charlie Kirk. I think we can skip that part. But Bondi appeared on Hannity, where Sean Hannity asked about the limits of freedom of speech. Oh, that too. Something captured in the Oval Office yesterday, probably by Aaron Rupar as well. In her response, Bondi cited the case of an Office Depot employee in Michigan who, in a viral video, refused a customer's request to print flyers for the vigil. Office Depot issued a statement on Friday saying the associate involved is no longer involved with the organization. So, that doesn't stop them from wanting to sue Office Depot anyway, because Office Depot is a business and it's recognizable and it's got deep pockets that can exact some sort of tribute to Trump and meddle in the affairs of this, private. It's not private, but it's publicly traded, I assume, but, a private business in the sense that it's not a governmental entity. And they're doing this left and right and insisting that corporations operate under their direction. And if they don't like it, they'll also, by the way, in some cases, grab 10% of the equity in the company for some strange reason. Anyway, so it was in Michigan. I don't know how they're going to fare with grand juries there. The Attorney General said the employee's actions may constitute a prosecutable offense. How so? Or this is the way she describes it. I think yesterday or today, Sean, a school board member right here in Virginia had to resign because she said horrible things about Charlie Kirk and that he deserved to die. I bet that they didn't say that. And who knows? I don't know where this school board member is. That's horrific. It's free speech, but you shouldn't be employed anywhere if you're going to say that. And employers, you have an obligation to get rid of people, which they did, of course, but that didn't stop Pam Bondi from saying that they were going to prosecute. So what's the point? You need to look at people who are saying horrible things and they shouldn't be working with you. Businesses cannot discriminate unless it's, gay wedding cakes, in which case, yes, they can. If you want to go in and print posters with Charlie's pictures on them for a vigil, you have to let them do that. We can prosecute you for that. I have met Harmeet Dillon right now, I have not met, but I have Harmeet Dillon right now in our civil rights unit looking at that immediately. That Office Depot had done that. We're looking it up, looking up whether or not there really is a law that you can do anything with here. Okay. Anyway, it's unclear whether Bondi was talking about charges against Office Depot, the former employee, or both. And, that's it. So, Mediaite has the benefit of being very succinct about these things and not going on at great length like me. Anyway, as we said, Office Depot acted. So, but there you have it. Just another indication, by the way, if you think you're going to get out from underneath the scrutiny of these idiots by knuckling under, I guess the answer is no. These companies have to fire these people. Okay, we did. Well, we're looking at charges. Well, okay, I don't think so. But by the way, let's see. I got to make another note of other things. I guess we got the Gutman thing, thanks to Scott, and Trump. Right, Trump sinking the boat. Right, I got to try and find the new thing on that one. Then, of course, there's also something I saw yesterday, and if I scroll back in my own feed, I think we can find it. It's. It doesn't make for great audio, I don't think, to play it because Trump is a little bit mumbly about this. Oh, there's the Reuters report of striking the other Venezuelan drug vessel, as he says. So we got that one covered, too. I just got to scroll back a little bit. But yesterday, I guess, I think it was, I don't remember the name of the guy, but the so-called reporter who shows up in the White House all the time, Murdery Trader Green's boyfriend is all I remember about him. But he's kind of distinctive in that he tends to shout out questions, that aren't questions. If they're not softball questions, then they're sometimes policy pronouncements on behalf of the White House somehow. And then he just says, tell us more about that. Or don't you think we ought to be punishing this guy? And Trump usually says, yeah, I recognize you. Yeah, we should be punishing that person, whoever that is. The exchange here, as Aaron Rupar has got it, is... now we have a name on it. Glenn is, I don't know whether that's Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend's name or not. Let me look that up. Well, now that I've got it isolated on the screen. What's her? I mean, should I just Google that? Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend. It comes up. All I have to do is put B, and that's the suggestion. Yeah, Brian Glenn. So we got it right. I recognized him right off the bat. It was that kind of stupid setup. Now, what's interesting is, I think Brian recognizes right away that Trump is kind of wandering into, or he's invited him to wander into First Amendment danger here. And he tries to sort of wave him off of it. But Trump is having none of it and just pushes past him and it stomps with both feet on the rake and, lets it go, lets it rip. The question / statement here that comes from out of Glenn's face is, well, I don't know. I guess, yeah, well, we'll try once again, turn up the laptop. This is at least taking place indoors, so you might be able to hear this one a little better. I'll bring well, if I move the microphone too much, any number of things will go on. Let me play you this audio here.
That's a violent radical left group. Okay, go ahead.
I got peppered with a lot of comments for doing that. They still have their First Amendment right, though. They're still out there protesting. You've got an amazing team.
Now, okay, so it's lousy audio. Oh, you got to stop, though. It's lousy audio. It's lousy to begin with. I think if I had played it for you as clearly as possible, you still have to, it helps to have a transcript, for one thing. And you got to sort of lean into it and look for what you're looking for. Trump's answer is kind of mumbly, but what Brian Glenn has asked him is, aren't they responsible for Charlie Kirk's murder? And Trump, I don't know it's not on the tape, but Trump takes the opportunity to say, yeah, they're vicious, horrible, left-wing, radical crazies, and we're going to do something about it. And Glenn then says, they're out there protesting right now. I think the question is, are you considering declaring Antifa, whatever that's supposed to be, a terrorist organization? And Trump is happy to nod and say, yeah, and agree with that. And because Glenn says, because they're out there now protesting right now, like, when are you going to go and kill them already, basically is the insinuation. But then he sees what's going on, and he says, well, they're out there protesting, yeah, but, they still have First Amendment rights and stuff, but, aren't you going to, do something about it? So that's the warning. But I understand they have First Amendment rights, and you do too. Don't do that. And Trump's mumbling answer there, you got to sort of lean in to listen to this. They still have their First Amendment rights, though, is, well, I'm not so sure. Whoa. That's the President of the United States saying another part of the Constitution, well, maybe that doesn't really exist. Maybe that doesn't mean what you think it means. I'm not so sure they have any rights. Maybe we do kill them. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right. Other things we need to move on to. We have already spent too long on Pam Bondi and her stupid latest thing. Let's see. I have, what other plan did I have? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Let me add, I guess, to the background of all of this. I think I put this one aside as, the article I was going to reference by way of, showing you, illustrating to you, proving to you that J.D. Vance had, in fact, used the Charlie Kirk show as his platform yesterday for some insane ranting. But the New York Times story is running under the headline, White House plans broad crackdown. And I know I hate using that word because it's meant to make him look like a strong man. White House plans broad crackdown on liberal groups, although others were more interested in the headline and illustrating, just like pointing out several people saying, yeah, this is not actually a headline that should be appearing in a democracy. But there it is. But yeah, mostly about J.D. Vance's unhinged rants on the Charlie Kirk show as the guest host yesterday. So anyway, I thought that was of interest, and the headline and the controversy about it was of some interest. What's this one here? Something from Blue Sky. I'm going to have to open it up to see. Oh, yes. This was the first indication that I had gotten about the thing. Good. This connects. I had mentioned it earlier that Trump and his lawyers sort of kind of have filed what purports to be a lawsuit against the New York Times. But I put aside a couple of other things, too, about it. But there's some really interesting stuff about it. And the article I put aside about it, and then maybe this is the way to do it, because I put aside the Australian broadcasting, the ABC report, ABC News from Australia about the lawsuit. Maybe because on something like this, it's probably, I don't know that theirs is the best exemplar here or not, but I'm starting to get the sense that American news coverage, with all of them being sued, of course, maybe we're not getting the sort of full and most thoughtful coverage of a story like this for fear among the other outlets that they too will be sued. Although I think some of them with real means might be, encouraging such a suit that they can take on the president. But I have my doubts at this point. But just like it's probably wisest to take to include in our coverage of, say, the arrests at the Hyundai battery plant from Korean press, not just because they're sort of the home news of the people who got arrested and will give their perspective, but also just to let everybody know that the rest of the world sees this stuff pretty clearly and doesn't feel under the same constraints in many cases in reporting it if they too happen to be an open society. So here's the ABC News coverage. Donald Trump files defamation and libel lawsuit against the New York Times, claiming, quote, massive economic damage. This is, of course, nothing he ever said, but it was in the lawsuit. But they write on his level. So massive economic damage to his brand value, which is not really a thing that, presidents have. He's, of course, coming from a unique perspective in all of this, but of course you should have been divested from all of that anyway. So what's the difference? Okay. In short, they offer up a little summary of what's going on here in case we don't get all the way through it. Donald Trump has filed a $15 billion US dollar defamation and libel lawsuit against the New York Times, 4 of its reporters, and the publisher Penguin Random House, which is a random combination of previously separate published house. All of that. Penguin Random House. Well, it's better than the Random Penguin House. Although, I don't know. Maybe I think that would be a fun place to live, don't you? Anyway, in case you were wondering, or in case you are in fact Australian, it's a $22 billion suit if it's in Australia. But the point there is if that happens, all the money that gets flushed down the toilet in that lawsuit goes down the opposite direction, right? But it's $22 billion of it. And that much more likely to clog the toilet as a result. So let's see if we can get our act together down there, Australia. Okay, U.S. President Donald Trump. That's the one we have. That's the way they have to put it in those stories. We usually just say President Donald Trump because we know we're the U.S. They don't. U.S. President Donald Trump has sued the New York Times, 4 of its reporters, and publisher Penguin Random House, which I love. I'm going to start calling them Random Penguin House from now on, I think. I'll probably forget. For at least $15 billion US dollars, 22 to them, claiming defamation and libel and citing reputational damage. A Florida, naturally, court filing shows. And wouldn't that be something if it was filed and Eileen Cannon got the suit? Drew the case, as it were. Mr. Trump's suit, not the big baggy blue thing, but the lawsuit, cites a series of New York Times articles, including an editorial prior to the 2024 presidential election, which said he was unfit for office. So there you go. The lawsuit also includes a 2024 book published by Penguin. That's all they say this time, Penguin. Are you telling me a penguin published this book? That's right. Right after he fried the rice. Anyway, the book is titled Lucky Loser, How Donald Trump Squandered His Father's Fortune and Created the Illusion of Success. Well, now he's just got Trump coin to make up for that. Defendants maliciously published the book and the articles, knowing that these publications were filled with repugnant distortions and fabrications about President Trump. The filing lodged to the U.S. District Court in Florida said the New York Times and Penguin did not immediately respond to a request for comment outside regular business hours. And it's way outside regular business hours if you're calling from Australia. In a post on his social media site, Truth Social, announcing the lawsuit, Mr. Trump accused the New York Times of becoming a virtual mouthpiece Oh, this is him. Virtual mouthpiece for the radical left Democrat Party. It's a very long, rambling Truth Social post. I put it away elsewhere, but they're going to excerpt it a little bit. The Times has engaged in a decades-long method of lying about your favorite president, me. He really does say that. Me, parenthetically. My family, business, the America First movement, MAGA, and our nation as a whole, Mr. Trump said in the post. So borrowing from Animal House there, if you insulted the United States of America. Yeah, well, no, not really. The New York Times has been allowed to freely lie, smear, and defame me for far too long, and that stops now. Mr. Trump's lawyers claimed, and I'm not really sure about their status as lawyers, Mr. Trump's lawyers claimed the publications had harmed the U.S. president's business, so what? He's divorced from it, and personal reputation, causing massive economic damage to his brand value and significantly hurting his future financial prospects. Ask him in another setting, how you doing financially, and he'll say, terrific, I'm richer than ever, billions of dollars are coming in. Oh, but you're suing for economic damage. Well, billions more should have been coming in. I don't know about that. But what was I thinking about along the way here? I don't know. Well, there was something. Anyhow, the harm to the value of TMTG, that's Trump Media and Technology Group stock, is one example of how the defendant's defamation has injured President Trump, his lawyers said, citing a precipitous decline in the stock price. Of course, one, I don't know if that's happened, and two, it's been a very volatile stock. Other things have done that, like Marjorie Taylor Greene buying in, but no claim there. The lawsuit claimed these publications were, quote, part of a decades-long pattern by the New York Times of intentional and malicious defamation against President Trump. By the way, embedded here is a screenshot of the long rant. I don't think that anything else is, well, I'll just give you some context, I guess, to see what kind of rambling lunacy there. This isn't in the lawsuit. So normally you'd just say, well, but this is the client. Usually they tell people, the clients, shh, be quiet, let the lawyers do the talking here. Today I have the great honor, capitalized of course, of bringing a $15 billion defamation and libel lawsuit, random capitalizations happening, against the New York Times, one of the worst and most degenerate newspapers in the history of our country, becoming a virtual mouthpiece for the radical left Democrat Party. I view it as the single largest illegal campaign contribution ever. Their endorsement of Kamala Harris was actually put dead center on the front page of the New York Times, something heretofore unheard of. I don't think so, but maybe. Maybe they don't put it on the front page, but, it was a big deal, this election. New candidate right in the middle, all of that. The guy who was the former president running again. The Times, and that he encloses in quotes, Times somehow, has engaged in a decades-long method of lying about your favorite president, me, my family, business, and America First. You heard all of that part. I am proud to hold this once respected rag responsible, as we are doing with the fake news networks such as our successful litigation against George Slopadopoulos /ABC/Disney and 60 Minutes /CBS/Paramount, who knew that they were falsely smearing me, that's in quotes for some reason, through a highly sophisticated system of document and visual alteration, which was, in effect, a malicious form of defamation and thus settled for record amounts. So, by the way, your settlement where they admit no wrongdoing, guess who says you admit wrongdoing? Or that you are, in fact, guilty of wrongdoing? This guy right here, which is both unacceptable and illegal. The New York Times has been allowed to freely lie, smear, and defame me for far too long, and that stops now. The suit is being brought in the great state of Florida. Thank you for your attention to this matter. He does say that. Make America great again. Anyway, in his social media post, Trump also points to past lawsuits, as you saw, including the U.S. ABC News Network and its anchor, which they by the way print his real name, George Stephanopoulos. They were ordered to pay $15 million toward Mr. Trump's presidential library to settle a lawsuit. And it's, by the way, I would say that's sort of misstating because they were ordered to pay it. I mean, there probably was a judicial order entered recognizing the settlement, but that's misrepresents, I think, the dynamics of the situation. But there you have it. They did, in fact, agree to settle. Let's see. This was all over an inaccurate on-air assertion that the president had been found civilly liable for raping writer E. Jean Carroll. That, too, a matter of nuance. Mr. Trump also cited a lawsuit against CBS parent media group Paramount over 60 Minutes thing. You remember all of that. Okay, we've gotten through the ABC News install. So it wasn't actually particularly revealing. Nothing we couldn't have gotten from American coverage of the situation. But I had earlier had hinted at something being odd or weird, I guess, perhaps, about the lawyers involved in this case. And here I'm pointing at something one Alex Merz had pointed out. Let's see, who's this guy? A professor of biochemistry. A professor. Well, now Charlie Kirk, people will try and go. He didn't say anything about Charlie Kirk, probably, but he did say something about our favorite president, him. And so he should be fired. Professor of biochemistry at, well, should I even go any further than that? You go find out where he works if you want to fire him. Don't do it. Professor of biochemistry, still allowed to have an opinion. And it's not even an opinion thing. It's just, this is what I found when I went looking. And what did I look at? First of all, here's a screenshot of the one of the last pages, the signature page, a signature block on Trump's complaint, signed by the attorneys Alejandro Brito, Brito, and it gives their addresses, their official addresses where they receive communication, because there's going to have to be some discussion back and forth between the parties here. And he gives an address in Coral Gables, Florida. As does, nobody else is from Coral Gables. The next one up is Edward Andrew Pulsick of Houston, Texas. And noting, of course, what's a Houston, Texas lawyer doing practicing in Florida? Well, pro hoc vice admission forthcoming. I'm sure it'll totally get approved because of what a competent and obviously competent and well-credentialed lawyer this guy is. And Daniel Zachary Epstein. No, that's interesting. I mean, I know, I'm sure. Let me just say there's probably almost certainly no relation to Jeffrey Epstein, who belongs in the news again today for various reasons, just because this guy shares the last name with him, Daniel Zachary Epstein. No connection whatsoever, even though he is from Boca Raton, Florida. Interestingly, it says here also pro hac vice admission forthcoming, which is interesting. If he's a lawyer based in Boca Raton, Florida, no, he would not need pro hac vice admission to the Florida bar to do this. And yet it says that at the bottom of his signature block. And my guess is that it was a copy paste job from Edward Pulsick's block, and they forgot to remove it. They just went back in there and changed the name and changed the address and didn't delete pro hac vice admission forthcoming. I'm just not sure why that's in there, but maybe that was what tipped off our poster here to go and take a look. He says, and is it he? I got to go look back at Alex. I gather Alex Merz says, and he's responding here, by the way, to the news that the suit has been filed that had been posted by well-known internet figure Ken White, Pope hat, now at the moment Stand With Chicago hat. Can I see, will they favor me with a look at what it was that he had posted? And Pope hat is responding to Josh Friedman posting the news. Sorry, just so you know the provenance of all this. Saying Donald Trump sues the New York Times and Suzanne Craig, Russ Buettner, and Michael S. Schmidt, and I thought Peter Baker was in there too for some reason, for defamation. And the complaint for some reason begins thus. And I guess this is what tips people off that there's something a little off about these lawyers. The, I guess, first entry in the recitation of the facts behind, as they allege them, behind the complaint. Nature of the action is the header here. And paragraph 1 says, on November 5th, 2024, President Trump won the 2024 presidential election over Vice President Kamala Harris in historic fashion, emerging victorious in both the Electoral College and the popular vote, and securing a resounding mandate from the American people. Now, this is a little over the top, but also not necessary in the least. President Trump trounced Harris with 312 electoral votes and a sweep of all 7, quote, battleground states. This victory was remarkable for many historic reasons, including because President Trump had to overcome persistent election interference from the legacy media, led most notoriously by the New York Times. And then illustrated with a screenshot of the Electoral College map. And, you know, one of his favorite props pointing to the map. This is really just, I mean, at some point in recitation of the facts, yes, you got to take care of some of the boilerplate stuff. By the way, the party we're talking about here is, in fact, President of the United States, Donald Trump. Very often you'll say, you know, he's president by virtue of the fact that he won the presidential election in 2024. Yes. But yeah, you're not supposed to then spend time bragging about how many electoral votes you got. So that in itself was remarkable. Pope Hat just commenting, this is a stunningly pathological lawsuit, even by Trumpian standards. It reads as if he was holding a gun to the head of a child of the lawyer drafting it. And it does, but we won't read it. But, you know, you could, and then you would have that feeling. Alex Merz just takes note of the lawyers who filed this thing. Well, who are these lawyers? So they give their addresses. I told you what towns they're from, but they give an actual physical address. And he took a look, I guess, on Google Maps. Show me the address listed as the contact address for Alejandro Brito. Show me the address for Edward Andrew Palcic in Houston. Show me Daniel Zachary Epstein's address in Boca Raton. And he includes the pictures that they came up with. And let me tell you, the Coral Gables address, and it's given here, 2121 Ponce de Leon, number 650, appears to be a picture taken of a parking garage. And I don't mean like the garage at a home. I mean like a public parking garage with several levels. That's the address as given for his first lawyer. His second lawyer, at least it's a building, an occupied building. It's a home, a private home, but a very small tract home in Houston, Texas. Maybe it's his home. Maybe it isn't. I get the feeling that it's a mail drop more than anything else. And then the third one is of a strip mall, which at least you could then explain, well, there might be a mailboxes, et cetera, in this strip mall, but that's not what came up in terms of the number that was given. The number here, it just says 8903 Glades Road and doesn't say which unit. So I don't know, maybe the zip code, does he give a zip +4 or something like that for his location? Just kind of curious. No. Oh, Suite 8A, number 290. All right. Well, so at least the thing would get to the right place. But anyway, it's a strip mall, nondescript at that. And in the picture is, something and subs. I don't know what the place is. Vapes and more. There's a lot of and going on here. And La Vie Nails. So it's a nail salon is most prominent in this picture. But also it's this prominent, very successful plaintiff's lawyer's practice somewhere along. If it was a mail drop, it certainly could be. But it also inspires thinking along the lines of, I'm at the nail salon. I'm at the plaintiff's bar. I'm at the combination nail salon and plaintiff's bar. Yeah, sure. Why not? Absolutely. Prominent attorneys doing this work. So maybe that's why it reads in such ridiculous fashion. It might make a great long form read one day to go through the actual complaint as filed. Let's see. Oh, by the way, given that we read from the Australian ABC earlier, It says here, according to, a video captured by ASIN, saying President Trump warns an Australian reporter that he's hurting Australia because he asked him about his business activity. You are hurting Australia very much right now. They want to get along with me. Your leader is coming to see me soon. I'm going to tell him about you. So he's going to snitch on. So maybe it's true that the other reporters in other countries may find themselves under threat too. And maybe it's no more helpful to read what they've got for us than anybody else. Okay, I better put that one aside because I've lost it. Although a couple other people are grabbing it too. Here's more of the exchange reporters. Should a president be engaged in so much business activity? I'm not. Where are you from? Australian Broadcasting Company. You're hurting Australia very much right now. We'll have to take that one and put it aside for you by way of proof of what's going on. All right, let's see. Back to Instapaper to try and organize thoughts as we move forward. What's this one? Is this... oh, yes, I really do need to catch up on this one. All right, well, let me open up this one in the browser here. And does it help us to read this, or should we be reading other prepared points about this? As you know, we spent an awful long time, about a week or so ago, maybe more, covering the absurdity of Bill Pulte's allegations against Fed Board of Governors member Lisa Cook, who then, of course, Trump purported to have fired. The allegations, as you recall, she committed mortgage fraud by doing this very common thing, which I know about a lot, happens a lot because I made millions of dollars encouraging other people to do it. And by the way, as it turns out, some enterprising reporters looking into the fact that this really is a widespread phenomenon found that Bill Pulte's parents had perpetrated this same so-called mortgage fraud by claiming more than one primary residence. It's that common. But even more to the point, what's really interesting about what's going on here is, of course, Trump said that he fired Lisa Cook. Then they said you can't fire her for nothing. You could only fire her for cause. So he said, I did. I fired her for cause. What's the cause? It's these allegations of mortgage fraud. That wouldn't really hold together normally for 10 other reasons, but just to get to the point more quickly, as it turns out, someone heard me, not really, saying, Trump and paperwork, man, always check the paperwork. You'll find out that almost anything he's trying to do or anything he's trying to claim will fall apart if you examine the paperwork. And I'm going to have to scroll a long way because we've parked so many things in Instapaper lately. But someone actually went ahead and took a look, and hey, believe it or not, when reviewing the mortgage documents from both Michigan and Georgia, where Lisa Cook owns property, it turns out that no, this was not even the case. It wasn't a matter of, well, someone encouraged her to do it, or, well, she made a paperwork mistake. No mistake was made. She does not claim more than one primary or permanent or what was it? I don't remember what the other languages are, but it does not claim more than one primary residence. She just doesn't. Now, I don't know whether Bill Pulte was handed bad information or whether he was handed AI slop because, of course, I believe that underlying all of this is that he contracted possibly, I think the story was with Palantir and I would imagine in league with the Dodgy Boys, built a search engine that was designed to allow him to weaponize this claim of mortgage fraud against anybody he needed to target on behalf of President Trump. And anyway, it may be that they just served him slop. You want information that says that she's claimed 2 primary residences? Here it is. Except when you go and dig up the real paperwork, no, she was extraordinarily careful. And many people pointing out wisely, I think, on social media, yeah, welcome to the world in which black professionals operate all the time, knowing that they will be put to undue scrutiny over just about anything. And although the temptation is overwhelming because so many people white professionals who actually believe that they'll never be scrutinized for no particular reason, might be tempted to take these opportunities to save on taxes, save on interest rates. But up-and-coming black professionals know very well somebody could use almost anything against me. She actually said, I'll pay that additional fee. I'll pay those additional taxes. Those are what's due from me, and I don't want to be caught up in anything untoward. And she actually filed the paperwork correctly. Nonetheless, the Trump administration is in court insisting that they have fired her and fired her for cause. The Fed is set to meet to consider the big question of interest rates pretty soon, and she's suing to say I should be in that meeting.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. So, yeah, we got a situation in which, in an attempt to back up his claims for firing Lisa Cook, Donald Trump is out there saying he fired her for cause, and he's like now legally obligated to represent as such in court. And what would the cause be if it turns out that, no, when you examine the paperwork, the claim that there was mortgage fraud committed can't even stand? You just have no predication whatsoever for making that charge. It's awfully difficult to insist that she's then been fired for cause. I mean, it was on shaky grounds to begin with. The firing for cause, normally, the way you would interpret something like that as well, is it something that they did while serving in office? And this wasn't something she had done while serving in office, but as it turns out, it wasn't something she did at all. So, I mean, I don't know what you're supposed to do with this, but now they're forced to stand there and say that she was fired and fired for cause, and she shouldn't be there at a very consequential meeting at which Trump has been trying to force the Fed to lower interest rates for a long, long time. And they've been taking their time about it as usual. And now he's replaced somebody who retired or resigned from the board just sort of impromptu for I don't even know what reason was given. Although I wondered whether it might be connected to you better resign or we're going to accuse you of mortgage fraud. Of course, if you actually have a recollection that you may have signed papers to that effect, you might want to duck out early, but no word that that's actually got anything to do with it. It would be interesting, though, if that was it. And then they were like, I don't remember what I signed. I better get the hell out of Dodge. But did you check the paperwork before you went? Because, maybe you should. But as I mentioned, somewhere along the line, somebody did some enterprising reporting showing that it's such a common occurrence that Bill Pulte's own parents had done exactly that. I thought that was really something. Let me see if I can find all of the things that I had put aside on that front. No, that ain't it. I'm going to examine some of these Blue Sky posts. No. That's not it either. And a lot of other interesting things that we really need to get to, but what a crowded roster here in Instapaper. No. Boy, oh boy. Here we are. Okay, maybe this is it. And Reuters coverage of a lot of these things too. By the way, the first thing I put aside on this subject from Reuters, I guess I scrolled away from, but the one you need to hear is this one. And although Reuters is paywalled now for some reason, but their exclusive report from September 13th, exclusive, Fed Governor Cook declared her Atlanta property as, quote, vacation home, documents show. Thanks to writers Chris Prentice and Marissa Taylor, we get that news. Let me see. Oh, maybe they'll let us read this one. Maybe we got a gift link to it. A loan estimate for an Atlanta home purchased by Lisa Cook, the Federal Reserve Governor accused of mortgage fraud by the Trump administration, who now I guess should be saying was a huge damage to my brand. I want $15 billion from the administration. Well, why not? Well, the papers show that Cook had declared the property as a vacation home, according to a document reviewed by Reuters. The document, dated May 28, 2021, was issued to Cook by her credit union in the weeks before she completed the purchase and shows that she had told the lender that the Atlanta property wouldn't be her primary residence. The document appears to counter. Thank you. Gee whiz. Be generous with that. Why don't you? Appears to counter other documentation that Cook's critics have cited in support of their claims that she committed mortgage fraud by reporting 2 different homes as her primary residence. 2 independent real estate experts said. Now, notice the language here. This is interesting. I guess it makes it unclear whether anybody has seen this stuff. The document appears to counter other documentation. Is that it? No. It appears to counter other documentation that Cook's critics have cited in support of their claims. Have they shown the documents to anyone in support of their claims? I don't know. It's not clear from this. However, it seems like something you should pursue at this point. Can you show me the documents that led you to conclude that there was a problem here? No. Like that'll solve the problem for you. But will they? I'd be interested. Maybe they have documents that just are confusing. Anyway, Reuters was unable to reach Cook for comment. She has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing regarding her properties, which also include a home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and an investment property in Massachusetts. So that's 3. Administration officials led by Bill Pulte, director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, have used mortgage documents from her Atlanta and Michigan properties to accuse Cook of claiming both as her, quote, primary residence. Again, they have used mortgage documents. How so? They have said they have some, or they have shown them to us. The allegedly false claims of residence, which could improve mortgage and tax implications for a homeowner, led Pulte to refer the matter to the Department of Justice, prompting a federal investigation and an order by President Donald Trump to dismiss her. Cook, who remains at the Federal Reserve, has sued the president to resist her dismissal, as she should. Reuters was unable to determine whether Pulte or administration officials are aware of Cook's Atlanta loan estimate. Spokespeople at the FHFA, the agency led by Pulte, didn't respond to a request for comment. The documents cited by Pulte, and there's a link here. So he did it on X. But the documents cited by Pulte, let me see, does his tweet reproduce the documents? I'm going to open the link just to take a look, because I got to know. What does he say? Yeah, well, I'm sorry. All there is the referral letter to Pam Bondi is all that's displayed there. But it's on letterhead, and so therefore, I mean, that's really, I guess, what he was going for in all of this. But the documents cited by Pulte include standardized federal mortgage paperwork, which stipulates that each loan obtained by Cook for the Atlanta and Michigan properties is meant for a primary residence. But documentation reviewed by Reuters for the Atlanta home, filed with the court in Georgia's Fulton County, clearly says the stipulation exists, quote, unless lender otherwise agrees in writing. So there's that, but it doesn't matter because she didn't make this claim. The loan estimate A document prepared by the credit union states property use, vacation home. I mean, open and shut. Bye. The document appears to help Cook's case, you think? Said two real estate experts who aren't involved in representing her. That's because it indicates that during the loan application process, she told the lender she intends to use the property as a vacation home. The lender, Washington-based bank fund Staff Federal Credit Union. Okay. Staff Federal Credit Union? Okay. Washington-based bank fund. Okay. That's a weird way of putting it. Didn't respond to a request for comment. And the request for comment is, can you comment on your weird name? In another point that could help Cook's case, you think? She never requested a tax exemption for the Georgia home as a primary residence, according to property records and a Fulton County tax official. So, again, open and shut on both fronts. What the F are we even doing here? You should be getting sued for defamation. But, of course, they'll claim sovereign immunity for that. A separate document reviewed by Reuters related to a federal form completed by Cook as she obtained security clearance for her role at the Federal Reserve shows that in December of 2021, she also declared the Atlanta property as a, quote, second home. Although unrelated to the mortgage, the declaration on that document, a supplement to a U.S. government national security form known as the SF-86, is consistent with the claim on her Atlanta loan summary. All the documentation that I guess, seen discussed in this thing. I haven't seen the documentation here either. But interesting. A completely separate universe of documentation says the exact opposite of what Pulte and Trump have said. And yet, fired for cause is the claim. Surrounding the accusations against Cook is a battle over Trump's efforts to wield more control over the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, and an independent institution meant to be free of political meddling, as are so many other institutions in the United States government, or the quasi-governmental institutions, independent agencies among the federal government, but which Trump has been firing people from left and right. And the court has allowed, even as they have carved out an exception for the Fed, and yet nobody is helping out here for some strange reason. Why isn't there an emergency intervention by the Supreme Court saying, we said the Fed doesn't count in all this? Stop trying to fire Fed governors, especially on false accusations. You'd think this would be resolved rather more quickly, don't you think? Anyway, Trump has often criticized Fed governors because of their reluctance to cut interest rates since he returned to the White House earlier this year. Amid the controversy, the personal finances of other government officials and their families have also come into question by rival politicians, the media, and others. Last week, Reuters reported that Pulte's own father and stepmother had declared two homes in two different states as their primary residences, prompting a town in Michigan to remove a tax exemption for their home there and charge the couple for back taxes. But it doesn't matter that much because they're billionaires, I think. Pulte and his parents didn't respond for a request for comment about that matter. There's a link to the prior thing, and I think that's the one I probably had put away in Instapaper. I don't think there's any reason to read that one other than to say, yeah. How does Bill Pulte know that almost everybody does this? Well, his family does it. Not the same claim I was making earlier that his family is involved in encouraging others to do it. That I think is still true. And that's how he knows how widespread it is. But by way of proof of how widespread it is, they did it themselves. Wow. But we're still sitting here waiting for courts to resolve her case somehow. I just find that rather astonishing. All right, let's see. I'm just looking through a couple of other things that I ought to provide for you. And I think I opened this one up too. One of these Blue Sky posts from Anna Bauer, but I may have to flip around. There's so many tabs open now. What's the Anna Bauer one that I've got? Is that this one? No. All right, well, I'll have to go back in and open it up and find out what that was about. Was it related to this story or not? Yes. So what have I got here? Let's open this one up. And I guess there had been no reporting about this just yet, but she was saying breaking news. That was just yesterday, 8:10 p.m. So, yeah, maybe I didn't see an article about it yet. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rejects Trump's effort to remove Lisa Cook from the Board of Governors, allowing her to participate in tomorrow's, that's now today's, meeting. The docket text notes a per curiam order filed that the motions for leave to participate as amicus curiae filed by the Separation of Powers Clinic and Azoria Capital Incorporated and James T. Fishback be granted. The clerk is directed to file the lodged amicus briefs. It is further ordered, this is the important part, I guess, that the motion for stay and administrative stay, that is, I guess, the government Trump looking for a administrative stay of the lower courts, I guess their lower court's order that she be at least temporarily reinstated pending the outcome of the case. He wanted that stayed. The clerk is directed to file the lodged amicus briefs. It is further ordered that the motion for stay and administrative stay be denied. A concurring statement of Circuit Judge Garcia, joined by Circuit Judge Childs, and a dissenting statement of Circuit Judge Katsas, that's going to be embarrassing, are attached before Judges Katsas, let's see, you know who, Katsas, Childs, and Garcia, obviously. All right, Katsas would grant the motion for stay pending appeal. That's really interesting. I mean, there are technical grounds for doing it, I guess, if you haven't got the record in front of you that, no, she didn't actually do any of the things that's being claimed here. None of the paperwork bears it out. Well, you know, that's not the law we were evaluating. The law I was evaluating was the availability of an administrative stay in a situation like the one that was claimed when the case was filed. But I don't know. You're going to end up looking pretty stupid. Next step, as Anna Bauer says, next step, SCOTUS. You can read Garcia's concurring opinion here and Judge Katz's dissent if you're interested over at Lawfare Media. Katz's, someone else is summarizing here. Katz's believes it is settled law that the statements of the President of the United States need have no relationship to actual reality as experienced by the rest of the country. The Humpty Dumpty doctrine. Okay, very interesting. Is there more? There's more commentary here, but does it follow and make for? Well, no, they're still talking about the Supreme Court's previous carve out for the Fed. No discussion so far that I've seen, maybe there's some writing out there somewhere, about the impact of watching the rest of the country having to watch the DOJ stand in court and say that this case needs to be resolved in favor of the president's prerogative to dismiss her for cause when there's no cause. Not only no cause in office, but no cause out of office either. If he can get away with this, I mean, then literally it's just there's no holds barred. The Supreme Court has some kind of weird hang up about the Fed. If they just turn around and dismiss that because Trump has to win everything, that would be something all by itself. But imagine if you could fabricate charges saying she claimed 2 primary residences. Oh yeah? Show me the claims. The dog ate them. But that's okay. She still was fired for cause. If the Supreme Court okays that one, I guess it's all over. Is that the line in the sand? I don't know. I guess we'll see. And we'll see in short order. All right, let's see. Other things to note for the record before we get out of here for the day. Let's see. What else have I put aside here? What's this thing here? I got to open up everything and take a look. Why did I think this Blue Sky post about the defamation lawsuit was important? Oh, it was the one that included the screenshot of the Truth Social post. Okay, so we don't need that one. Back then to Instapaper and back to our desperate scrolling. Everything is sort of hodgepodge and all over the place. They have tags that I could be using, to organize these things, but it's a fast-paced thing, putting things away in Instapaper for our later review. By the way, lots and lots of profiles coming out just now about Stephen Miller, who I said was just, making the most egregious statements. He's certainly the most far out there on the limb of just about anybody in the administration. But lots of profiles basically claiming behind the scenes Republicans a little bit befuddled and bitter in some cases about the fact that he seems to be really running a shadow presidency here. Donald Trump, of course, mentally out of it most of the time. Somebody's got to be filling in. Under normal circumstances, we've always, Americans have kind of always trusted, even if the president's a little batty, there will be level heads running the show and pulling the levers behind the scenes. And what do you do, though, if it's somebody even more mentally damaged than the mentally damaged president? And the answer is, I don't know. Take a look around and read the newspaper, I guess, because that's how you'll find out what happens, if that's the case. I mentioned to you the other day also, just switching topics, but to one we mentioned in our weave earlier, the raid on the Hyundai electric vehicle battery plant in Georgia, and the yes/no deportation of these hundreds of workers. And I mentioned that the Korean papers seem to be seeing things quite clearly, maybe more clearly than we were seeing things here in our own newspaper coverage. I had higher hopes for what was happening in the Australian broadcasting, the Australian ABC, but that was just a short summary article. I'm sure they're doing a much better job elsewhere. But I mentioned to you, there were some excerpts shared with us by Sarah Jong and translated by Google Translation that may or may not have gotten all the nuances of what they're saying there about this case, but they're out now. She's shared with everybody on Blue Sky the English language version, the official English language version published by the Korean media outlet in question. I just thought it might be interesting to read what they're reading by way of the closer or the official translation in Hankyore, maybe Hankyore. I don't know how you emphasize that. Hank, like as in Hank Aaron, Yore, Y-O-R-E-H, but all represented as one word here. I don't know what the meaning of it is. It's, I'm sure, the name of the publication, but just by way of identifying it, that's all I've got. The column, an editorial and opinion piece, is titled Imperial Tyranny, Korean Humiliation. Oh dear. I'm sorry about that. This incident should prompt us in Korea to comprehensively reassess our investment projects in the U.S. And by the way, somebody else has made the very good point, a very valid point. I don't know whether we should. I say good. I don't know if we should be rooting for it or anything. It's hard to tell where to come down on something like this. But I guess for your own safety, you guys are going to have to consider this. Korea is uniquely positioned to lead the charge on this, and I guess Venezuela could join them, for instance. But I don't know that I don't know whose voice the international community will value more, if any of them. But if they had, there are a number of allies that could join in this. But Korea is uniquely positioned to say, hey, I don't know if it's smart for international organizations on which we have a vote and a voice, like the International Olympic Committee or FIFA, to go ahead with the plans to allow the United States to host these international competitions when it seems so clear that they will do outrageous things and perpetrate outrageous harms and visit outrageous harms upon duly admitted international visitors. We've already seen, like, at the lower level, Little League, like World Series, Little League World Series participating teams being turned away and denied visas. And I would not at all be surprised to see the same thing crop up with higher profile international competitions. And maybe they ought to be pressing it. Look, we went there to open a factory at their behest, and they arrested our people nonetheless. I don't think any of our athletes or coaches or international visitors who are just there to watch as spectators are going to be safe. It's not wise to go ahead with these plans. We'll see whether they leverage that in that way or not. Park Hyun is the editorial writer responsible here, and let's just run through it. This is how they're reading it in Korea. While many would have you believe that the fiasco involving over 300 Korean workers being arrested and detained by U.S. immigration authorities, I've got to make a note here of what's going on, while many would have you believe that this fiasco has been resolved by allowing the workers to, quote, voluntarily depart, and that's still in dispute, back to Korea, this is far from the truth. Korea, as a nation, was deeply shocked to witness our workers who had traveled to the U.S. to work at the request of American investors, shackled at their hands and feet with chains. This barbaric incident will leave a lasting stain on Korea-U.S. relations. I don't know whether he makes mention of it in this, but there were other reports indicating that as part of their detention. This is just the conditions at their detention facility, which has been a stain on American human rights law for some time, as it turns out. But that a lot of times these guys remained shackled in the detention facility, meaning that apparently some of them were describing in order to drink water at this facility while we were shackled, we had to lick it out of bowls like dogs. Well, hello, we shouldn't be doing that to anybody naturally, but oh man, this is going to reverberate internationally. I don't know if they make mention of that here. We'll have to see whether I can find the citations there in my own Blue Sky stream. I think we made some note of it. The mass arrests, though, are undoubtedly a wake-up call, a major rupture that opens our eyes to what's happening in the U.S. at this moment. We must heed this warning to close the loopholes and traps in our investment projects with the U.S. Otherwise, we may eventually face even greater calamity. And by the way, yes, still no settlement on what are the terms of what's the investment, how much, who controls what. Although apparently Japan went ahead and executed an agreement about this. They actually set it to writing, which is astonishing. And they agreed to the very ridiculous terms that have been circulated before, like that the 90% of the profit somehow goes to the United States, even though all the investment's coming from Japan. To understand what's at the core of this situation, we must revisit the Make America Great Again movement championed by U.S. President Donald Trump. MAGA represents a reactionary movement by white evangelical forces, and others, I would add, but that's easy for me to say, seeking to revert America to a time before the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Its core supporters are low-income, poorly educated white Americans and evangelical Protestants. Trump has become a voice amplifying the anxieties of these groups, whose societal status has been shaken by job losses due to globalization, deepening economic polarization, and a surge in immigration. Trump has incited them to channel their anger toward the established elite and, quote, outsiders, such as people of color, undocumented immigrants, and Muslims, specifically. Wow. Trump is fundamentally a populist and a white supremacist. We read the Google translation version of this the other day. His slogan of Make America Great Again should be phrased more accurately as Make America, or rather, Make White America Great Again. His insistence on imposing a 50% tariff specifically on steel and aluminum stems from the fact that white Protestant populations are concentrated in the American Rust Belt. Although I don't know if it's necessarily as accurate to say Protestant populations. Anyway, that may be a nuance they've missed. The massive crackdown on allegedly undocumented immigrants at the Hyundai plant in Georgia must also be understood within this context. The sight of our workers being let out in chains resembles the images of African slaves in the 18th and 19th centuries being dragged out by their owners. The Department of Homeland Security boasted that the raid was the largest single-site enforcement operation in its history, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement even brazenly released footage of the operation, which clearly risks human rights violations, as if to flaunt these arrests as their achievement. Far-right white Americans may have rejoiced inwardly at this incident. Even politicians like the governor of Georgia and local lawmakers who had previously been enthusiastic about hosting the factory have abruptly changed their stance and joined the chorus of discontent. The shift is likely because it's difficult to ignore the anti-immigrant sentiment among Americans born into citizenship. The U.S. is in the grip of an irrational frenzy. We did read this, but it's good to hear it again. It's lousy to hear it again, actually, but reminiscent of the McCarthyism that swept through American society in the 1950s. The U.S. could have resolved this issue diplomatically by giving Korea advance notice as an ally. Yet the crackdown, complete with helicopters and armored vehicles as if to gleefully flaunt their power, can only be explained as a political performance. The Trump administration's plan to revive manufacturing in America, and I know I'm late in this, well, let's play the music. To revive American factories is a strategy deeply influenced by political calculations rather than economic logic. Having stoked the discontent of the white working class in the Rust Belt to win his presidency, Trump has a strong motive to continue exploiting them politically. While he, as a political leader, may attempt to pursue such policies, these efforts amount to little more than wishful thinking. Historically, such attempts have rarely succeeded, and if they had, why did the British Empire, once called a territory where the sun never sets, crumble over time? Declining industries inevitably relocate to emerging nations over time. Even in Korea, we face difficulties in reviving such industries. How much more challenging would it be for the U.S., where production costs are at least 30% higher than ours, and over 2 decades of hollowing out in manufacturing have collapsed the industrial ecosystem? Trump is dreaming a delusional fantasy of using imperial might to forcibly mobilize allies and reverse this trend. To make matters worse, treating allied workers who are trying their best to assist in realizing this pipe dream as if they are slaves of a vassal state will jeopardize even those projects that had some potential. We're currently watching the U.S. foolishly shoot itself in the foot. That's not all. There's 2 more paragraphs we won't have the time to get to, but you know what it's about. They're going to have to wonder about the wisdom of making the investments they supposedly agreed to.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Time now to hand things over, well past time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's on tap today? Let's see. We've reached the SEAL Team 6 moment that federal judges feared would happen. Oh my. Okay, let's find out what that's all about. Plus, of course, his collection of news from around the country and around the world, as always, and we'll see you tomorrow.